I still remember the sound. It wasn't the explosion itself that haunted me, it was what came after. The silence. The kind that crushes your chest and makes you wish the bombs would start again, just so you could feel alive. My name is Miguel Duarte. I was 34 when I walked through the ruins of Sarajevo, my rifle trembling in my hands, and my squad, what was left of it, was completely silent. You ever felt like you survived something you shouldn't have? If you were me, would you keep walking, or just let the silence take you? When we arrived, they told us it was a peace mission. But there's no peace in a city where children hide behind burned cars and stray dogs fight over scraps of bread. We weren't heroes here. We were intruders wearing the wrong flag. I tried to convince myself that we were doing good, that we were helping. But when I saw an old woman sweeping glass off what used to be her living room, I started to wonder, who are we really saving? The day it happened, the air smelled like rain and gunpowder. We were moving through a narrow street when the first shot hit the wall beside me. Then came the blast. Screams. Dust. Everything turned white. When I opened my eyes, I saw the body of Silva, our medic, lying face down. I shouted for my team, but all I heard was that awful silence again. That was the moment I realized I was alone. What would you do if everyone around you disappeared in a second? Tell me in the comments, because that question still keeps me awake at night. Hours passed. Maybe days. Time didn't work the same way anymore. I wandered through streets full of smoke and bodies, hearing whispers that weren't really there. Then I saw her. A girl, couldn't be older than 13, bleeding, crawling out of a collapsed house. She looked at me like I was death itself. And maybe in that moment I was. My orders were clear. No civilian contact. We were there to stabilize, not to interfere. But when I saw the shrapnel lodged in her leg, I dropped my rifle. I tore a piece of my uniform and tried to stop the bleeding. She kept saying something in Bosnian, soft, trembling words. I didn't understand them, but I didn't need to. It was fear. The same fear I'd seen in every mirror since the war began. We found an abandoned apartment and stayed there through the night. The city outside sounded like it was breathing, heavy, dying breaths of a wounded beast. She pointed to herself and said, Ida. That was her name. I told her mine, Miguel. She smiled. For a moment, it felt like there was still something human left in the world. In the morning, I tried to call for extraction. No signal. The radio was dead, and I knew command would think I was gone too. Maybe that was better. Ida was getting weaker. I found some old canned food in a kitchen drawer, half rusted, but it was something. I told myself I'd take her to the Red Cross base by nightfall. But when I stepped outside, I realized someone was watching us. They were local fighters, 3 of them. Not soldiers, just men with rifles and hate in their eyes. They shouted at me, called me occupier. I raised my hands, tried to explain. Then they saw Ida inside. One of them aimed his gun at her. Without thinking, I pulled the trigger first. The sound echoed for blocks. When the dust settled, they were all down. But the shot had drawn attention. More would come. I looked at Ida. She was crying, shaking. I knew I'd just made things worse for both of us. I picked her up and started walking toward the hills. Each step felt like I was walking deeper into hell. That night, as we hid in a church with no roof, I asked myself, was I still a soldier, or just another man trying to save himself from guilt? The stars above were cold, like the eyes of the dead I'd left behind. Ida slept beside me, holding my dog Tag like it was a promise. I wondered if she'd ever understand what I'd done for her and what I'd become because of it. Do you think I did the right thing saving her? Or should I have followed orders and left her behind? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my boots? By the 3rd day, hunger felt heavier than fear. Ida hadn't spoken since the church. Her eyes were hollow, as if she'd already said goodbye to this world. I kept whispering, we'll make it. But even I didn't believe it anymore. Every noise made me reach for my rifle. Every shadow looked like a ghost from my squad. When I closed my eyes, I still heard their voices calling for help. You ever tried to forget something your soul refuses to let go of? At sunrise, I saw smoke coming from a nearby valley, a small village still standing. I carried Ida on my back, step by step. When we got there, people stared at me like I was a monster. One man spit on the ground and muttered something under his breath. They didn't want soldiers here. But an old woman came forward, took Aida's hand, and led us inside her home. Sometimes, kindness shows up when you least deserve it. Her name was Mira. She gave us food, bread, onions, and boiled potatoes, and didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She knew what war does to people. That night, she told me, every man thinks he's fighting for peace until he loses someone innocent. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. I stayed there for 2 nights. On the third, a knock on the door froze my heart. When I opened it, I saw 2 men in UN uniforms. They weren't strangers. They were from my own squad. Their faces said everything. They thought I deserted. And helping a local civilian? That was enough to be court-martialed. I tried to explain about Ida, but one of them raised his weapon and said, "Orders are orders, Miguel." I looked at Ida, shaking, terrified, and realized that if I surrendered, she'd be sent back to die. I couldn't let that happen. I stepped forward slowly, pretending to obey. Then I grabbed the barrel of his rifle and turned it away. The shot went off. He fell. The other ran. That was the moment I stopped being a soldier and started being a fugitive. We escaped through the forest as helicopters flew overhead. I knew command would mark me as compromise. It didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was getting Ida across the border. Her fever was getting worse. Every breath she took sounded like a goodbye. By the 5th day, the mountains were covered in fog. The path was steep, wet, and endless. Ida collapsed halfway up the trail. I held her in my arms, whispering stories about the ocean, about how Brazil looked in the summer, anything to keep her awake. Her lips curved into a faint smile. Then nothing. Her hand slipped from mine. And just like that, the world went quiet again. I buried her beneath a pine tree, used my dog tag to mark the spot. When I walked away, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Not a soldier, not a hero, just a man carrying the weight of a girl's death and the memory of every mistake that led there. What would you do if saving someone cost you your soul? Would you still call it the right choice? Tell me in the comments. I really want to know. Weeks later, I found myself crossing into another village, unshaven, starving, wearing a coat that wasn't mine. A group of civilians recognized the insignia on my uniform and cornered me. One of them shouted that his brother died because of men like me. I didn't fight back. I didn't have the strength. They beat me, but I didn't raise a hand. I deserved it. Maybe that was my punishment. A priest found me that night. He patched my wounds and gave me water. He asked, "What are you running from, son?" I said, "Myself." He nodded, like he'd heard that 1,000 times before. He told me, God forgives, even when we don't. But I wasn't sure I wanted forgiveness. Maybe I just wanted to remember so I'd never make the same mistake again. Thank you for staying with me this far. If you're still watching, it means you feel what I felt, the weight, the guilt, the silence. Stay with me, because the hardest part of the story is still to come. Months passed before they found me. I was working in a refugee camp, carrying boxes of medicine when 2 military trucks stopped outside. They didn't say a word. They just showed the insignia and pointed to the back of the vehicle. I knew it was over. No escape this time. And maybe I didn't want to escape anymore. They called it a disciplinary hearing, but it felt more like a funeral. The charges: desertion, disobedience, homicide. I didn't deny any of them. I just told them the truth. About Ida, about the mission, about how orders mean nothing when your conscience is already in pieces. One of the officers stared at me for a long time before saying, "Sometimes doing the right thing still breaks you." He wasn't wrong. They gave me 2 years in confinement, a mercy, they said. I served every day in silence. No visitors, no letters, just the sound of my own breathing and the distant echo of memories that wouldn't fade. Some nights, I thought I heard Aida's voice. Other nights, I prayed she'd forgotten me. When I was finally released, the world had moved on. The war was over. People rebuilt their lives, cities rose again. But inside me, nothing had changed. Every loud sound still made me flinch. Every silence still felt like Sarajevo. I moved to Lisbon after that. Got a small job fixing boats by the harbor. People there think I'm quiet because I'm shy. Truth is, I'm quiet because I've said everything I had to say, and no one really wants to hear it. But at night, when the sea wind hits my face, I swear I can still smell the smoke. One evening, a reporter came to the docks. He said he was making a documentary about the war. Someone had told him about a Brazilian soldier who disappeared. I almost denied it. Then I realized maybe it was time.
Time to speak.
Time to confess. We met the next morning. He turned on the camera and I told him everything. The mission, the silence, Ida, the choices that destroyed me. When I finished, he asked, "Do you regret saving her?" I looked straight into the lens and said,
No.
"Regret is for things that could have been different. That girl was the only good thing I ever did in that war." When the documentary aired, some called me a hero. Others called me a coward. I didn't answer either. Because the truth is somewhere in between, a space where guilt and love coexist, where right and wrong lose meaning under falling bombs. Now, when I walk through the city, I see people laughing, rushing, living. They don't know that every step I take is measured, that every sound reminds me of what silence once cost. And yet, I'm still walking. Maybe that's what survival really means, not escaping death, but learning how to live with it. If you were me, would you tell your story? Would you confess, knowing people might never understand? Tell me in the comments, what would you do if your truth came with a price? And if this story spoke to you, subscribe for more confessions like this one. Because the past never really ends, it just waits for someone brave enough to remember. No matter how deep your scars run, you can still rise from them. Pain changes us, but it also shapes who we become. So if you're fighting your own war, remember, surviving isn't weakness. It's proof that you're still here, still human.